The hum of the repair bay was the only constant in Elias Cade's life. The sound of machines cooling, consoles flickering, and the faint rattle of a ventilation system older than he was filled the silence. He preferred it that way. Out here, on the edge of map space, no one asked much of a human engineer beyond keeping the lights on and the hull patched. He was grease-stained, perpetually tired, and rarely noticed. It suited him. That night, the cycle was quiet until the doors opened with a hiss, admitting a figure whose presence seemed to warp the stillness around her. Elias froze at the sight. She was tall, armored head to toe in a suit unlike anything he had ever studied, its smooth black surface fractured with glowing fissures of burnt circuitry. She carried herself not like a soldier limping from battle, but like someone who expected the world to part before her. The air itself seemed to sharpen when she entered. "I require repair," she said, her voice low and resonant. No introduction, no request, just the statement of a fact. Elias wiped his hands on his oil-stained coverall and forced his voice to remain level. "You're lucky I'm awake. Most techs are off shift by now. Bring it here." She stepped forward, and the fractured plating of her armor sparked in protest. The damage was significant, deep gouges from energy weapons, microfractures where shielding should have held. Elias reached for his scanner, curiosity already overriding caution. Whoever she was, she had been in the thick of a fight, and had survived. Up close, the details startled him. Insignias etched into the armor surface were unlike any military crest he knew, curling patterns that suggested both artistry and authority. The material was lead. Defensive systems nested like secrets, each more complex than the last. This was not ordinary battlefield gear. "You've got redundancies here I've never seen before," he muttered, mostly to himself. "This tech's not standard issue." Her eyes, visible through the faintly transparent visor, fixed on him. They were sharp, unblinking, and made his hands sweat. "You will not speak of what you see," she said, not threatening, but commanding. Elias nodded quickly, returning his focus to the workbench. "Right." Lips sealed. He set to work, hands moving with practiced precision. He bypassed scorched circuits, reattached fiber conduits, and recalibrated failing energy nodes. The armor systems fought him, defensive protocols resisting his tools, as though mistrusting human touch. Still, Elias persisted, coaxing it open with improvisation and patience. His breath slowed, his world narrowed to the delicate interplay of sparks and hums. All the while, the woman stood in silence, watching. Her presence pressed against him, more weight than words could carry. He wondered about the scars beneath the armor, about the kind of person who bore such destruction without flinching. "Why come here?" Elias asked finally, voice tentative. "There are better-equipped stations closer to the inner lanes." Her answer was immediate. "Because you were here." The words unsettled him. He tried to laugh it off, a nervous chuckle that sounded thin in the cavernous bay. "I doubt you even knew I existed before tonight." Her gaze lingered on him long enough to make the silence heavy. Then she turned her eyes back to the far wall. "Do not assume knowledge is yours to measure." Elias frowned, focusing on a particularly stubborn fracture in the armor plating. Whoever she was, she clearly lived in a world of secrets and hierarchies far above his pay grade. He wanted to press, but something about her bearing, about the way she held still as though listening to a rhythm beyond his perception, kept him from asking more. Hours passed in silence. The armor slowly regained integrity, sparks dimming, systems stabilizing. When Elias finally leaned back, wiping sweat from his brow, the suit hummed with renewed strength. "That's as much as I can do without a full rebuild," he said, exhaustion tugging at his voice. "You're mobile, your shielding will hold, but don't expect miracles if someone tries to put you through a plasma furnace again." She regarded him with that same unyielding stare. Then, to his surprise, she inclined her head, barely, but enough to register. "Adequate." He exhaled, half amused. "I'll take that as thanks." She turned toward the exit, the repaired armor whispering with smooth motion now. Elias found himself unwilling to let the moment end so abruptly. "You never gave me a name." Her steps slowed. For the first time, her voice softened, though it carried no warmth. "It is not for you to know." And then she was gone, disappearing into the corridor with the same silent authority she had entered with. Elias stood alone in the bay, tools still scattered across the workbench, the hum of the station resuming its dominance. Yet the air felt different, charged with the echo of her presence. He tried to shake the unease from his chest, telling himself it was just another repair, just another customer. But he knew better. The insignias. The unusual redundancies. The weight in her gaze. She was not just another soldier. She carried secrets heavy enough to bend the space around her, and somehow Elias had been drawn into their orbit. He looked at the repaired armor schematics, still glowing on his console, the alien patterns etched across them. A queen or criminal, warrior or fugitive. He didn't know. What he did know was that this was not the end. Something had shifted. He could feel it in the silence that followed her departure, as though the station itself was holding its breath. And Elias Cade, forgotten human mechanic, realized he had just stepped onto a path that might change everything. The next cycle began with unease that Elias could not shake. The station looked the same. Steel corridors, dim lighting, the faint smell of recycled air, but the rhythm had changed. Dockhands spoke in hushed tones, patrols doubled their routes, and even the traders who normally barked prices across the concourse lowered their voices. Something was stirring beneath the thin veneer of routine. Elias caught fragments as he passed, mentions of bloodlines, hunters, and a throne unsettled. Each whisper seemed to circle back to a single theme, royalty in hiding. He forced himself to ignore it, but the image of the armored woman lingered in his mind, shadowing his every step. His shift began as always, buried in diagnostics for freighters that barely held together, yet he found his thoughts straying back to her armor. The schematics he had glimpsed during repair replayed in his mind. Redundant shielding arrays, command-level encryption woven into power conduits, systems designed not for survival but for sovereignty. Whoever she was, she belonged to something vast and dangerous. He told himself not to get involved, not to speculate. Curiosity was a habit that could get a man killed on the frontier. That resolve lasted until the workshop doors hissed open again. She returned, her armor no longer flickering with damage, but moving with a seamlessness that was almost predatory. Elias straightened instinctively, trying to mask the flutter in his chest. "You came back," he said, the words slipping out before he could stop them. "You completed the first repair," she replied, voice as steady as before. "But refinements are required. Your work, though unconventional, improved what my own engineers could not." Elias blinked at her, caught between pride and disbelief. Unconventional is a polite way of saying improvised. I didn't have your tools, so I made do. Her gaze studied him, unreadable as ever. You adapt with little. That is not a weakness. The words unsettled him more than criticism might have. He bent over the armor again, letting his hands occupy him while his mind searched for balance. "So," he said after a moment, "you travel across systems to find mechanic who rigs things with spare wiring and stubbornness. Either you're desperate, or you've got nowhere else to go." She did not answer immediately. The silence stretched long enough that he wondered if she would leave it hanging. Then she said, "Desperation and necessity are close companions." Elias glanced up at her. Something in her tone suggested more than passing inconvenience. He wanted to ask, to peel back the layers she so carefully guarded, but before he could, alarms blared through the station. The sound was sharp, urgent, a metallic wail that cut through walls and conversation alike. Elias dropped his tools, rushing to the console. Station alerts scrolled across the screen, an unidentified fleet at the perimeter, broadcasting demands. His throat tightened as he read the translation. They were calling for the surrender of the hidden queen. His gaze shot to her. She stood utterly still, shoulders squared, as though the alarm confirmed a truth she had expected all along. Her silence spoke louder than admission. Elias's suspicion crystallized into certainty. She was no soldier, no fugitive mercenary. She was exactly what the invaders claimed, a queen in exile. The workshop suddenly felt too small, too exposed. "You should go," he said quickly. "If they are looking for you, you can't be here." She turned toward him, her voice cool, but edged with iron. "Forget what you have seen. Forget who you think I am." The command struck him harder than he expected. Forgetting was impossible now. He had seen the cracks in her armor, both literal and otherwise. Still, he nodded. Fine. But don't think the station's going to stay neutral if they believe they're harboring you. Her eyes flickered with something, regret, perhaps, or calculation. Without another word, she strode from the workshop, leaving Elias alone with the rising wail of the alarm. He considered running to the shelter bays, blending in with the other workers who would no doubt scramble for cover. That would be the smart move. Stay invisible. Stay alive. Yet when the first tremors shook the hull, he stayed rooted to the spot. He knew too well that her armor, though repaired, still carried his modifications. If she relied on them in the fight to come, any failure might lead back to him. His hands clenched into fists. He wasn't just a bystander anymore. The decision was made for him when the workshop doors slammed open, this time not by her hand, but by a squad of mercenaries in mismatched armor. Their weapons gleamed under the workshop lights, and their voices barked in a guttural tongue. One shoved Elias against the wall, snarling for him to reveal the Queen's location. "I don't know what you're talking about," Elias said, heart hammering. It wasn't entirely a lie. He didn't know where she had gone, only that she was somewhere within reach. The mercenary pressed the muzzle of his weapon harder into Elias's chest. Another began tearing through the workbench, scattering tools and half-finished components. Sparks flew as consoles were ripped apart. Elias gritted his teeth, rage and fear tangling in his gut. An explosion rocked the station, throwing them all off balance. The mercenaries cursed, scrambling for footing as smoke drifted through the corridor. In the chaos, Elias slipped free and ducked behind a storage crate. His workshop, the only place he had ever felt secure, was being torn apart around him. And at the center of it all was a woman whose name he still didn't know, but whose secret was already reshaping his fate. He pressed a hand to the floor, feeling the tremors of distant combat ripple through the metal. Somewhere out there, she was fighting for survival or for a throne. And Elias, against all reason, realized that survival for him now depended not on staying uninvolved, but on deciding where he stood in her war. The lights flickered once, then steadied. Smoke thickened. The mercenaries regrouped, shouting to one another as they prepared to sweep the bay again. Elias ducked lower, every nerve in his body alive with the knowledge that he had a choice: remain the faceless mechanic who fixed machines and kept his head down, or step into the storm that had just torn open the station's doors. The decision weighed heavier than the station's hull, yet he knew there was no turning back. His life had been altered the moment she walked into his bay, armored and silent, carrying the kind of power no human should have touched. The alarm screamed, the walls trembled, and Elias Cade realized the galaxy had found him at last. Elias had never thought himself brave, but survival sometimes demanded actions that looked like courage from the outside. When the mercenaries advanced through the smoke, he darted between storage crates, moving with the same quick efficiency he used when navigating a malfunctioning reactor. He knew every inch of his workshop, every loose panel and every tool within reach. Improvisation was second nature. He grabbed a coil of live wiring from a maintenance kit and jammed it into the deck plating, sending a sudden arc of energy across the floor. Sparks leapt, startling the mercenaries into stumbling back. Their curses filled the air, but Elias had bought himself a handful of precious seconds. Those seconds ended when the bay doors exploded inward in a blaze of light and fire. She entered, not as the mysterious traveler in need of help, but as a force of authority clad in the armor he had repaired. Queen Seraphis moved like a storm-given flesh, her armored gauntlets flaring with energy as she struck down the nearest mercenary with a single blow. Behind her came a handful of guards, their armor less advanced but their loyalty unquestionable. The tide turned instantly. Elias pressed himself against the wall, staring as chaos unfolded before him. She was no longer the silent figure watching him repair fractured plating. She was a commander, precise and merciless, every motion echoing with discipline bred from power. He had suspected her importance, but seeing it confirmed with such clarity made his throat go dry. When the last mercenary fell, Seraphis turned toward him. Her visor retracted, revealing eyes like burnished steel, sharp and unwavering. "You remain alive," she observed, as though it were unexpected. "Barely," Elias replied, forcing a crooked grin he didn't feel. "You forgot to mention your enemies like to kick indoors." For the first time, a flicker of something softened her expression. Not amusement exactly, but a trace of acknowledgement. You understand now why I cannot linger. He swallowed. You're a queen. Her silence confirmed what the alarms and the mercenaries had already shouted. My rivals seek to erase my claim, she said. This station was meant to be neutral ground, yet even here their reach spreads. Elias wanted to laugh, but exhaustion and fear strangled the impulse. Instead, he sank onto a half-destroyed crate, rubbing his face with a grease-stained hand. So I patched up a queen's armor. That's new. Usually I get cargo haulers with blown coolant valves. She studied him with the same steady gaze she had carried since their first meeting. Your work preserved me. My armor resists weapons it was never designed to withstand because of your changes. You see structures differently, not bound by the assumptions of my engineers. I see broken things and figure out how not to die in the process, Elias muttered. Adaptation, she countered. The rarest strength. The words unsettled him more than the fight. She was a queen hunted across the stars, and yet she stood there, speaking as though a human engineer mattered. He shifted uncomfortably. So what now? You've got enemies outside, mercenaries inside, and a station that won't stay intact forever. I'm just a mechanic. Not exactly prime material for royal rescue operations. Her jaw tightened, but her voice remained steady. You will aid me. He barked a disbelieving laugh. That sounds a lot like volunteering me without asking. It is necessity. She stepped closer, her presence heavy, commanding without effort. You altered my armor in ways I do not fully understand. Those refinements cannot be undone, and in conflict they will be required again. You will remain with me until this is finished. Elias stared at her, incredulous. You're dragging me into a war I didn't start because I'm handy with tools. You are already in it, she said simply. The truth of it settled like a stone in his stomach. His workshop lay in ruins, his anonymity shattered. The mercenaries had seen his face, knew he had touched the queen's armor. There was no going back to obscurity. Seraphis extended a gauntleted hand. Stand with me, and I will see your people protected. Refuse, and you will be alone when they return. He wanted to protest, to reject the impossible choice, but the reality was already decided. He placed his hand against hers, the cold surface of her armor swallowing his warmth. The next hours blurred into a frenzy of preparation. Elias worked beside her and her guards, recalibrating armor systems and reconfiguring energy cells with scavenged parts. He felt like an imposter among warriors, yet when he demonstrated a makeshift shield array patched from station power nodes, the queen regarded him with open approval. Her guards whispered among themselves, skepticism giving way to respect. Between tasks, fragments of conversation slipped through. She spoke of duty, of bloodlines weighed down by expectation. In return, Elias confessed his frustrations, how humans were seen as second class among alien powers, tolerated but never trusted. Their burdens were worlds apart, yet somehow parallel, both bound by roles that left little room for choice. Once, during a lull, she asked, why persist in repairing, when discarding is easier? He thought of the station's battered systems, of ships cobbled together with desperation and ingenuity. Because discarding isn't an option for people who can't afford to start over. You work with what you have, and if you're lucky, it holds. She considered this in silence, then inclined her head. Perhaps survival is the truest form of sovereignty. Their uneasy alliance deepened as the station groaned under renewed assault. Explosions rattled the hull, warning lights flickered, and the air thrummed with tension. Elias improvised defenses from whatever lay at hand. Plasma torches rigged as traps, conduits rerouted into shock barriers. The queen fought alongside her guards, her armor gleaming with the modifications he had built. At last they found themselves pressed against a barricade, enemy forces closing in from multiple corridors. Elias crouched behind cover, sweat running down his temples, every nerve screaming. Seraphis stood beside him, unflinching, her presence as steady as a pillar. You could have fled, she said quietly. Yeah, Elias answered, gripping a spanner like a weapon. But then who would fix the mess you keep dragging behind you? A flicker of a smile touched her lips, brief, but real. It was gone in an instant as the enemy's footsteps thundered closer. Together, They turned toward the oncoming storm. The corridor shook as enemy fire hammered the barricade. Metal screeched, smoke curled, and the air grew heavy with the promise of collapse. Elias crouched low, fingers white-knuckled around the spanner he clutched, a mechanic's tool pretending to be a weapon. Beside him, Queen Seraphis stood tall, her armor gleaming with the modifications he had stitched into it. Her presence steadied the air, her posture refusing fear even as the station itself seemed to tremble toward ruin. The barricade gave way with a thunderous crack, shards of plating skittering across the floor. Mercenaries pawed through the breach, weapons raised, voices snarling in alien tongues. Seraphis moved first, her gauntlet flaring as she unleashed a blast of kinetic force that hurled the front line backward. The clash that followed was chaos made flesh, energy bolts scorching walls, steel meeting steel, screams echoing in confined space. Elias ducked instinctively, the spanner slipping from his grasp. He scrambled toward a control panel, instincts guiding him where fear tried to paralyze. He tore open the casing, sparks biting at his skin, and rerouted power conduits with a speed born of desperation. The overhead lights flickered, dimmed, then pulsed to life as his improvised shock grid crackled across the corridor. Mercenaries staggered, convulsing under the sudden surge, giving Seraphis and her guards precious seconds to strike. "Useful," she called out, voice carrying over the din. Elias barked a ragged laugh. "Glad my suicidal wiring's appreciated." But the relief was fleeting. From the smoke emerged a figure clad in dark, jagged armor, taller, broader, every inch radiating menace. The warlord, unmistakable, moved with deliberate calm, his weapon humming with a predatory energy tuned to counter Seraphis's defenses. The mercenaries fell back instinctively, leaving a circle of space for their champion. Seraphis stepped forward without hesitation, her visor sealing shut once more. "Karath," she said, the name sharp with contempt. The warlord's voice reverberated through his armor, deep and mocking. "Exile Queen, did you think scraps of human ingenuity could save you from inevitability?" Elias's stomach knotted. The warlord's weapon was no ordinary blade. It hummed with a frequency that resonated against the walls, designed to unravel energy shields and pierce through even royal armor. Seraphis braced herself, but Elias could see the calculation in her stance. She knew this fight would test even her. They clashed with thunder. Sparks rained as blade met gauntlet, energy colliding in bursts that scorched the air. Seraphis moved with regal precision, each strike purposeful, each step measured. Yet Karath pressed harder, his weapon biting closer with each exchange. Elias felt useless, a bystander to a duel beyond his comprehension. Still, his eyes darted to the systems he understood, the flickering lights, the overtaxed conduits, the resonance humming through the warlord's weapon. A realization struck him like cold water. The weapon drew power not just from its core, but from ambient frequencies tied to the station's grid. He could disrupt it. He had to. He sprinted back to the panel, tearing deeper into the circuitry. His hands shook as he rewired connections, overriding failsafes, rerouting current through channels that had never been meant to carry such load. The station groaned in protest, bulkheads vibrating as power bled away from life support and into a single concentrated surge. Seraphis faltered, the warlord's blade grazing her armor and sending sparks cascading across her chest. Elias shouted, "Now!" and slammed his palm against the console. The lights cut out. For a heartbeat, darkness swallowed everything. Then a surge of raw energy ripped through the air, collapsing into the warlord's weapon like a tidal wave striking a fragile wall. The blade sputtered, screamed, and imploded in a flash of searing light. Karath staggered, his armor sparking wildly, his confidence undone in an instant. Seraphis did not hesitate. She drove her gauntlet into his chest, energy flaring, and the warlord crashed to the ground with a thunder that silenced the corridor. The mercenaries, leaderless and shaken, scattered into the smoke. Elias slumped against the wall, chest heaving, the acrid smell of burnt wiring in his nostrils. The station's systems groaned, lights flickering weakly back to life, but the immediate threat had passed. He had survived again, not through strength but through the stubborn ingenuity that had kept him alive this long. Seraphis approached, her armor scorched, her visor retracting to reveal eyes burning with fierce triumph. She extended a hand, not in command this time, but in acknowledgement. You risked your life for one not of your kind. Elias let out a breathless laugh, taking her hand to pull himself upright. You'd be dead without my wiring tricks. Seems we're even. Her gaze softened for a heartbeat. Not even. Debt remains, and I do not forget debts. The words carried weight far beyond gratitude. Elias felt it press against him, the realization that their fates had intertwined in ways neither could easily sever. When the surviving gods regrouped, Seriphis turned to them with authority restored. The throne will not fall. This night proves it. Her voice was steel, but beneath it ran the current of renewal, as if battle itself had reforged her claim. Later, when the station settled into uneasy quiet, she found Elias again in the remnants of his workshop. The tools lay scattered, panels scorched, but he was already sorting through the wreckage with weary determination. She watched for a moment before speaking. Come with me. I will see you made Royal Engineer. You have proven your worth. Elias looked up, startled. For a moment he allowed himself to imagine it. Halls of alien grandeur, resources beyond measure, recognition he had never known. Yet the thought sat uncomfortably. He rubbed a hand across his face, grease streaking his skin. I fix things because no one else bothers. Palaces don't need men like me. Stations like this do. She tilted her head, curiosity flickering. You refuse a crown's favor. I'm human, he said simply. And if I've learned anything out here, it's that someone has to look after the forgotten corners of the galaxy. That's where I belong. Her expression shifted, the faintest ghost of a smile touching her lips. Perhaps that is why your people endure. She left soon after, her guards forming a protective ring around her as they prepared to depart. Yet before she vanished into the docking corridor, she turned back once, her eyes meeting his across the distance. Queens do not thank mechanics, she said, but perhaps they should. And then she was gone, leaving Elias alone in the silence of his ruined workshop. He lowered himself onto a battered stool, staring at the scattered tools and shattered panels, the echoes of battle still humming in the air. The station was scarred, but alive. He was scarred, but alive. Somewhere beyond the stars, a queen carried his work into wars yet to come. Elias Cade picked up a wrench, the familiar weight grounding him. He had secrets now, heavier than any tool. Secrets that bound him to the fate of a throne he had no claim to. The galaxy might not remember his name, but it would feel the ripples of what he had done. And deep down, he knew this was not an ending, but the beginning of something larger, something that would not let him go. Elias woke to the hum of the station, a sound he had once found reassuring, but now carried the weight of every battle scar carved into its walls. The repairs he had made during the night still smoldered in his thoughts, and though exhaustion gnawed at him, his mind refused rest. Every flicker of the lights, every groan of the bulkheads whispered that the reprieve they had carved out was fragile at best. He had thought Seriphis gone, returned to her people and her throne, yet she returned at dawn, not with fanfare but with silence. Her armor bore fresh etchings, ritualistic sigils Elias had not seen before, each line glowing faintly as though alive. When she removed a helm, the fire in her eyes had not dimmed, but there was something heavier behind it now, an acknowledgement that her war had shifted. You kept this place alive, she said, her voice steady, though not as detached as before. But survival is no longer enough. Karath was only the blade. Others hold the hilt. Elias set down the tool he had been fussing with, giving her his full attention. So cutting off the head doesn't end the beast. Her lips curved into the faintest echo of a smile. Human sayings. Crude, but apartment. The words carried more than observation, they carried invitation. Elias sensed it, though he wanted to resist. He was no soldier, no court strategist. He was a man who made things work with whatever scrap he could find. And yet the galaxy seemed intent on dragging him into the core of conflicts far larger than himself. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of her most trusted guard, armored in crimson and silver. He bowed briefly before Seriphis and cast a wary glance toward Elias. The council convenes aboard the royal dreadnought. They demand your presence, Majesty. They doubt your claim. Seriphis straightened, the light across her sigils intensifying. Then they shall be reminded what it means to doubt a queen. Her gaze slid to Elias, firm but not unkind. You will come with me. The god stiffened. Majesty, to bring a human. Her voice cut him off, regal and final. He is no mere human. He is proof of what loyalty outside bloodlines looks like. He stays. Elias felt the weight of the god's disdain press against him, yet Seraphis's decree allowed no argument. He had become part of this theater, whether he wanted it or not. The journey to the dreadnought was tense. Its halls dwarfed him, a cathedral of steel and light, designed not merely for function but for awe. Alien banners shimmered against the walls, each sigil telling stories of conquest, lineage, and blood. He followed Seraphis closely, her steps purposeful, her presence commanding the respect, or at least the fear, of every warrior they passed. The council chamber was a half-circle of towering figures, each adorned in elaborate regalia, their faces etched with suspicion. The chamber's floor gleamed like polished obsidian, reflecting every movement like a second stage. One counselor rose, his robes glimmering with threads of gold. You return from exile with claims and scars, but little else. And this, his gaze landed on Elias with undisguised contempt, this fragile creature you parade as ally insults our blood and traditions. Elias felt the burn of their scrutiny, the dismissal of his worth. He was out of place, out of depth, and yet he could not retreat. Not now. Seraphis's voice rang clear, steady as stone. This fragile creature dismantled Karatha's strength when none of my bloodline could. He saved more than a queen. He saved the line itself. Would you call that weakness? A murmur rippled through the chamber, voices sharp with disbelief and unease. Another counselor sneered, leaning forward with predatory grace. If your crown rests upon human ingenuity, perhaps it is a crown already lost. Elias's jaw tightened. He wanted to speak, but Seraphis's raised hand silenced him before words could slip free. She turned slowly, meeting each counselor's gaze in turn, her authority radiating like heat. My reign is not bargained with your approval. It is forged in fire and proven in survival. If you wish to challenge it, step forward now, and let blood speak louder than words. The chamber fell into silence. No counselor moved. None dared. Elias's pulse hammered in his ears. In that silence he understood the true conflict. They were not only fighting mercenaries or warlords, but the rot within, the traditions that clung to power even at the risk of collapse. He understood then why Seraphis had returned to him, why she had chosen to keep him close. He was not bound by their blood, and thus not shackled by their pride. When the council finally dispersed, Seraphis lingered in the chamber with Elias. The vast space seemed suddenly smaller, the weight of the galaxy pressing down on them both. You see now, she said softly. It is not only enemies from without who threaten us. It is those within who would rather see me fail than see the throne endure. Elias exhaled slowly, leaning against the cold wall. You're asking me to stand in the middle of that storm. I fix machines, Seraphis, not politics. Her eyes met his, unyielding yet not unfeeling. Machines break because of weakness in their design. Councils are no different. I do not need you to wield a blade or wear a crown. I need you to see what others refuse to see. That is your gift. The words struck deeper than he expected. He had always thought of himself as patchwork, a man holding broken things together until they limped forward another day. But in her eyes, that was not failure, it was rare strength. He wanted to protest, to tell her she had chosen wrongly, but the truth lingered like fire in his chest. Part of him had already chosen. He had stood against mercenaries, rewired death into salvation, and faced down a warlord. He had been tested, and he had not broken. Seraphis turned to leave, her armor catching the dim light of the chamber. The council will not remain silent for long. We have bought time, nothing more. Prepare yourself, Elias Cade. The battles to come will demand more of us both. When she was gone, Elias remained, staring at his reflection in the obsidian floor. A human among giants, a mechanic among warriors, and yet bound to a queen whose war had become his own. He could feel the tide pulling him deeper, and though fear gnawed at him, something else rose within, a determination as stubborn as the steel beneath his hands. He whispered into the emptiness, half to himself, half to the ghosts of doubt that lingered in the chamber. Then let's see if a mechanic can hold up a crown. And the silence that followed seemed less like indifference and more like agreement. The dreadnought's corridors thrummed with tension, each vibration in the deck a reminder that the Queen's hold on power was contested from every direction. Elias walked beside Seraphis, his stride stiff and uncertain, though outwardly he tried to match her composure. The guards flanking them radiated suspicion, their eyes lingering on him with the same wariness one might reserve for an exposed wire sparking in a flooded chamber. He had never been so far from the life he once knew, and yet he felt tethered here, pulled deeper into a current he could no longer escape. Seraphis carried herself as though the weight of kingdoms pressed upon her shoulders and found no purchase. He, by contrast, felt the sharp edge of every glance, every whisper. Yet when he caught her looking at him, measuring, perhaps reassuring, he found strength to continue. They entered the command spire, a chamber dominated by a panoramic view of the stars. Fleet formations glittered beyond the dreadnought's hull, ships arrayed in lines of cold precision. Elias caught sight of banners he didn't recognize, sigils glowing against the void like predators circling prey. He leaned closer to the glass, unease prickling his skin. "Those ships aren't yours." "No," Seraphis answered, voice clipped. "They belong to houses who swore loyalty once. Their presence here speaks of betrayal." The word cut sharper than any blade. Betrayal was not abstract. Elias remembered mercenaries storming his workshop, the station's walls trembling with violence. He saw the same threat painted on the canvas of stars, only larger, capable of reducing entire worlds to cinders. A strategist approached, bowing deeply to Seraphis before casting a cold look at Elias. "Majesty, the fleet maneuvers to encircle us. They issue demands: surrender your claim, abdicate the throne, and exile yourself into the void. In return, they promise mercy." Seraphis's expression did not flicker. She stood as still as carved stone. Mercy offered by wolves is merely delay before the slaughter. Elias clenched his fists, frustration rising. "So what's the play? You've got a handful of loyalists against an armada. Those odds don't fix themselves." The strategist bristled, but Seraphis gestured for silence. Her gaze fell on Elias, unblinking. "He asks the right question. We cannot outmatch them with steel alone. But the dreadnought holds systems designed in secrecy, technologies unfinished. Your insight into broken things may see what my engineers overlook." Elias felt the room tilt. The notion of meddling with alien systems beyond human comprehension made his stomach churn. Yet he also knew he had done it before, on her armor, on the failing station, in the chaos of survival. The unfamiliar became familiar under his hands, not through knowledge, but through intuition and stubborn refusal to let failure win. "I'll need access," he said finally, his voice steadier than he expected. "Schematics, maintenance shafts, anything you've got hidden under all this ceremony." The strategist scoffed. "A human tinkerer cannot alter the outcome of interstellar war." Seraphis's reply carried the weight of command. "A human tinkerer already saved your queen. He will have what he requires." There was no argument after that. Within the hour, Elias found himself knee-deep in conduits, his hands blackened by strange alloys that hummed under his touch. Alien symbols scrolled across interfaces, defying comprehension, but patterns revealed themselves, circuits singing in harmonics he could almost feel rather than read. He saw redundancies, flaws disguised as strength, systems that might be repurposed. Slowly, an idea formed, a resonance feedback loop, using the dreadnought's vast reactor not to strike, but to disrupt enemy formations, scattering them without firing a single shot. He presented it to Seraphis in the heart of the engine chamber. His explanation was halting, full of analogies drawn from human machinery, but she listened with unwavering focus. When he finished, she placed a hand on the humming reactor wall and nodded. "Risk and brilliance are often kin. Do it." The next hours blurred into relentless work. Sparks flew, alarms howled, and more than once he nearly lost his grip on sanity as alien systems bucked against his interference. But Seraphis remained nearby, not interfering, only anchoring him with her presence. At moments when doubt clawed at him, he felt her eyes on him, steady and unyielding, and the doubt broke apart like brittle glass. At last, the system roared to life, its resonance thrumming through the hull. Outside, the enemy fleet shifted, their formations unraveling as interference scrambled their precision. Confusion spread across the stars, banners faltering, warships colliding as order turned to chaos. The command spire erupted with voices of astonishment. The strategist who had doubted him now stared as though Elias was some creature born of legend. But Seraphis's gaze alone mattered, and when it fell on him, her pride was unmistakable. "You turned their blades against them without drawing your own," she said quietly, "for him alone." He wiped sweat from his brow, his hands trembling. "Just bought us time. They'll regroup. They always do." Her nod acknowledged both truth and necessity. Time is the currency of survival, and survival buys victory. For the first time since this began, Elias felt not like a man dragged into another's war, but like a participant in shaping its course. Fear lingered, sharp and real, but alongside it bloomed something new, belief that perhaps his hands, untrained though they were for war, could alter the fate of more than broken machines. As the disrupted fleet reeled in the distance, Seraphis turned from the stars to him. Her armor gleamed with the faint glow of the sigils he had once mended, the same armor that had first bound their fates together. "You have given my people hope, Elias Cade. But know this, the storm is not broken, only delayed. The next strike will test us beyond endurance." He met her gaze, the weight of her words pressing heavy on his chest. "Then we hold until it breaks." For a moment, silence stretched between them, not empty but filled with unspoken understanding. Two lives, impossibly different, had braided together beneath the shadow of a crown and the glare of war. Whatever came next, neither could turn away. Beyond the viewport, the stars still burned, indifferent to the struggles of queens and engineers. But inside the dreadnought, resolve forged itself in fire and steel, ready to face what the void would hurl against them next.